The following is a presentation of the Mat Talk Podcast Network.
It's time to go on the mat. The Cedar Valley's longest-running radio show devoted entirely to wrestling. Brought to you by Rolling Ford and the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Dan Gable Museum on 1650 The Fan.
It is that time. On the mat, 1650 The Fan. I am Kyle Klingman of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Dan Gable Museum, joined by a man who demands better government, Doug Van Gelder. I'm wearing my pin, buddy. I'm for you.
I see that. That's it's quite a relic out of the past, or my past anyway.
You didn't even notice. It took Scott to actually notice what I was wearing. I have an old school button that says Doug Van Gelder for better government. And I don't want to tell you where I got it. But
I know where you got it.
Well, yeah, I know, but we're trying to keep some suspense here.
Yeah,
Doug.
okay.
But you ran a couple times in Grundy, and you actually ran for your votes.
Well, I did.
Explain.
My whole thing when I ran for mayor was I'd run a tenth of a mile for every vote I got. So I got a little over 500 votes and had to run a little over 50 miles. So
how long did the 50 miles take you?
Oh, about 10 days.
10
days?
About
5 miles a day.
Okay.
Yeah.
And people were interested, or did they check out after a while? Like, guys, he's just.
Well, I think after the first week they saw that I was doing it, and that was good enough for them. So
yeah,
I got some good-natured ribbing about it.
I bet you did.
Still do to this day.
How many times
I
did you run?
I should have kept running, is what they said.
How many times did you run for office?
Actually, 3 times. Once for a mayor, twice for a county supervisor.
Okay. It didn't work out, huh?
No. I was a Democrat. In Grundy County, that just don't fly.
Did you get close? I mean...
Yeah, I think it was close the first time I ran for supervisor. I think the difference was the write-in ballots that they got at the nursing home.
Yeah. Yeah.
Honest.
I mean...
That's the way it worked then. I didn't know about that. I just, was a rookie into politics, and they went out there, and I think it was probably 50 votes they won by.
Yeah.
50 or 100 maybe.
Well,
I don't remember for sure.
As much as we think of you, I just think you're underutilized in the sport of wrestling. And I keep going back to this Hail Caesar, and I know that some people give you the thumbs up as they go by. They know where you sit. But I want a grand entrance. I want you coming in with 6 wrestlers holding you on some sort of a cot, and you're eating grapes, and really get into this. And whatever music you want for the entrance is fine.
I'll think about that for a while, but I don't do enough for the sport to deserve that.
Well, it's not whether you deserve it, it's whether we will be entertained.
Oh, you'd be entertained, I'm sure.
Yeah, and that's what we want.
Anything I do entertains you,
I know
Kyle.
that, but let's let the other people in the world in on this and enjoy that whole fiasco that you could really come up with. I think it could be a lot of fun. Hey, and I'm firm on this. I think wrestling doesn't do enough to enhance its product, and I think that wrestling plays a football game in reverse. I think they give us the crescendo right away, and then they have a decrescendo, and that's because of the style of wrestling. Why wouldn't you start with heavyweights first if it's your least exciting product? And knowing that 125 usually is going to be more exciting because the guys have more action, why would you not just switch the order? Now, my solution has always been...
I've always thought the selection should be random.
I do too. That's totally what I want. And I want to see it more like UFC or a boxing where you get to select who the highlight match is going to be at the end. Let the fans get involved. But that's way too progressive for people right now. At minimum, just say, hey, just flip-flop it. Go from heavyweight to 125. And we've talked about this. I just think it's such an important dialogue to continue on this show because we need that kind of impactful change. And a random draw sort of does that for you. You might start at 174 and then 165. It kind of gets you there, but it's still random.
If you could decide on a key match that could be put at the end, you could do the rest at random drawings.
Yeah, you could. But
there's a lot of ways you could do it, but I agree. People come and they just like, oh, yeah, okay, there's another one, there goes another one. Oh, God, here comes the heavyweights.
Yeah, but why wouldn't you put your focal point match last? I mean,
the NCAA has done quite well with that the last few years in and their national championship, individual championship.
Yep.
So
one time they do it. I mean,
did they do it twice?
Well, I mean, one time a year.
Oh,
they've done it twice. They ended with Dake and Taylor. They've actually done it 3 years in a row, I think. And they started in 2013, and they've done it every year since then.
And it's ironic that the heavyweight match was the key match this year.
Yeah, it was, and it deserved it. There's no doubt.
and
Snyder.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not opposed to it if it has that
was
potential.
A worthy match.
It was, yeah. But I'd still like to see it still go around and around, 165, 125, 133, based on what the fans want. And I think we need to engage people more that way. But that's way ahead. That's 10 steps ahead of what could happen. And the All-Star Meet has the capability to try something like that more and more and continue to tinker with rules. And
that's coming up real quick, isn't it?
Yeah, it's coming up next week.
Yeah.
And it's fun to watch. It's an exhibition. You get to move up in weight. Miles Martin and Gabe Dean at 184, 2 returning NCAA champions going at it. Ohio State has 3 returning NCAA champions in its lineup. And to think you have 3 NCAA champs and you're not ranked number 1. We talked about that either last week or 2 weeks ago. It's pretty amazing to think about how deep a lot of these lineups are. But, this is a special year. And it's because you have 2 returning Olympic medalists competing at the same time. And in freestyle, it's only happened 3 times in our history. Dan Hodge in 1956 won a silver medal, competed that year. Chris Taylor in 1972 competed the next year. And then Barry Davis took a redshirt year in 1984 and then came back in 1985 for his senior season. So you have 3 freestylers. You actually had 2 Greco guys. You had Garrett Lowney in 2000 and Brandon Paulson in 1996, both won medals. So if you just want to go in that freestyle slice of the pie, which is probably more comparable to what we're talking here, it's only happened 3 times.
There's been others that have tried it.
There's been others that have tried it.
Didn't make the Olympic team. So.
Correct, yeah. And I think we're just saying these are guys that actually medaled at the Olympic Games. Randy Lewis made an Olympic team in 1980, but that got boycotted, so... I mean, you had an Olympian coming back for his senior season, but how special is that? I don't know how that would happen again. It's so special that alone really should make you want to pay attention to this season more than any other season, because you have 2 returning medalists. You have a junior in Kyle Snyder who's 20 years old, an Olympic gold medalist, our youngest ever. When he decides to compete in his limited schedule, I would make sure that you are at that dual meet, or wherever he is, and it's going to be a very limited schedule like last year. But Jaden Cox wants to wrestle everything, and so if you're a Missouri fan and you're in that area, why wouldn't you embrace that opportunity? And I know you would too if you were around it. It's that special and that rare that that's really going to be the guide to what's going to happen this season. So we'll mention our guest before we get on to other commentary, Doug. Dwight Hinson, and you made the comment that we've had a nice Iowa State run. We've had Joe Gibbons on the show. We had Eric Aiken last week. This is another 4-time All-American. It seems like all these Iowa Staters happen to be 4-time All-Americans. But Dwight Hinson, a guy that I don't know that we hear enough from. And I think he's doing some good things on the youth level. And I remember watching him. He was in a stacked era for the 133-pound weight class.
That was a go-around then.
It was. For a while, you had Mike Mena in there. You had Eric Jatan. You had Eric Guerrero, just to name a few. And so Jeff McGinnis was in that early on. So there was a lot of great competition. So we get a chance to talk at length with Dwight Hinson about his wrestling career and what he continues to do with kids. He still lives in the state of Iowa in the Des Moines area. So to learn from him and just hear from him. This has been fun for me. I don't really want to see these interviews go out. I know we got to get into the season and talk about what's current with some of these guys. We probably have a couple more weeks of these style interviews.
Well, we want to encourage people to talk about the past. We want to have them remember going into the season what they've seen. I mean, that I like what you're doing with it.
Yeah.
So it's well worth the effort, I think.
Yeah, and they're
Dwight
still
Hinson,
relevant.
I can still see the guy coming out there. I mean, low hands and built like a brick outhouse,
Yeah.
Man, tough.
And thinking back to Eric Aiken's interview last week, that was outstanding for me, because Eric Aiken is a guy that absolutely has the right mentality for the sport. And I don't know what you took away from it, but I took away a guy that said, didn't think about wins and losses. I wanted to be out there and entertain the masses. It was about excitement, putting on a show. And the win or loss was going to come as a byproduct of doing things the right way. And if there's a prototype of someone that I think we should put on a pedestal of, like, this is how you should be, it would be Eric Aiken, just from the interviews that we've had. And just even him talking about the appreciation at that Olympic trials in 2000 with the music, and him just taking that moment and saying, I'm in this moment. Not many people get to experience this, and I'm going to relish this opportunity.
And, you know, the fans can do the same thing. They should. Every time they go, expect to see something exciting, and, you know, this could be an epic match. Anytime. It happens anytime.
Yeah, it does. And you've been to so many of these NCAA tournaments, and you know that 10 minutes before the start of the first match at the NCAA tournament is a 10 minutes that you cannot recreate in any other way. It's so special to be a part of that.
Yeah.
And I see that at the Olympic trials too.
You know, just like a lot of the dual meets back when Osenbaugh beat Bannock.
Yeah.
I mean, that I can still remember what it was like sitting there watching that whole thing unfold. It was incredible.
Yeah. It's
absolutely incredible.
Yeah. And
that place erupting like it did. Woo!
Yeah.
It was crazy.
I still want to see that. I want to see the mat get mobbed a little more.
It can happen every time.
Yeah, it can. It can. So we have a couple. We'll have a couple more of these interviews. We have Dwight Hinson today. We'll keep looking toward other people. Probably need to get a Hawkeye in the mix here, or a program outside the state of Iowa. Jeff Bradley does a great job of covering the UNI side. So
yeah, I'll put my thinking cap on and see what I come up with.
Yeah. And I
see what I'd like, or who I'd like to recall,
and try to make it a guy who isn't coaching right now. I think that's, as far as a college coach,
just a legendary competitor.
Figure, yeah, and they can be coaching elsewhere, but I think a lot of times we get the college coaches on because they're the ones in the spotlight. But it's fun when you can get an Eric Aiken who is a youth coach, Joe Gibbons who's running a Culver's.
They're the guys that are going to lead the sport to the next generation. So
yeah, and
it's important what they're doing.
And most of them don't get out; they're involved in some capacity, in some way, even if they're not coaching explicitly at a program, or even as high school or college. They're always helping in some way, and I think that's a real great thing for our sport. Wartburg ranked number 1 in the preseason poll for Division III. Not surprised there, but again, as you look up and down the lineup, I think it's I don't want to say a suspect number 1, but I think it's a number 1 you have to go into the preseason with a little bit of caution, because I don't see that Wartburg has that one guy that Byron Tate.
Wasn't it last season they weren't ranked at all?
No, that was 2 seasons ago.
That was 2 seasons ago, okay.
Last season they came in ranked number 1. And I thought Eric Keller did some of his best coaching that season, even though they got second place. I know that bonus points were really what hurt them in the NCAA tournament. But I like where Wartburg is, but I just think there's a lot of growth that can happen with that, because you look at some of the rankings, and I know it's early season and there's no match data right now, but I think Wartburg does have that development side to push guys to the finals. And again, there's not that one guy where you say, oh yeah, he's going to be in the finals, or you can count on him even getting third place. So Eric knows that. It's part of the calling card of the Wartburg program. That's why they're successful. They're not resting on their laurels or thinking that the preseason number 1 translates into anything. But hey, Messiah has done a good job, who's ranked second right now, of really building that program. And if the Battle of the Bergs is going to carry on, it looks like it's going to be on the Wartburg side, at least preseason, because Augsburg is currently ranked 14th in the nation right now. So we'll have to see how that plays out. And I know that a lot of the talk right now is on this Division III realignment. And I don't know if you followed that or just seen how that's worked out. Yeah, it's where the regionals play out.
Oh, yeah,
and who gets to go who, which is the stronger regional. And I know that is a hot topic. And I think that it's one that does need to continue to be addressed, and that we need to continue to have. As we look forward to the Division I season, Another guy that doesn't get mentioned enough, Gabe Dean of Cornell University, two-time NCAA champion going into the college wrestling season. And really excited about what he can do. We mentioned with him wrestling at the All-Star meet against Miles Martin. I think that that's going to really showcase if he has been able to separate himself from the rest of the pack going against the guy who bumped up last year. And Miles Martin was not the favorite going into the 174-pound weight class. And it's going to be exciting to see really where both of those guys are at the All-Star meet because of what their success was last year. So two returning NCAA champions, of course, that doesn't happen a lot. But I think that
They're probably both chomping at the bit.
Well, yeah, but I think with...
We're going to get this square before we start this season.
Yeah, but with Cox and Snyder really carrying the season and being the showcase, I don't want to see Gabe Dean put as an also-ran because I think he's a guy that really can bring a lot of entertainment to the circuit. I think he could be a guy, again, that we're going to want to watch. And you do. You have a lot of returning NCAA champions and finalists coming into the season. And I think that, especially with the University of Iowa having 3 finalists returning, it's which guy can they push over the top and get to the NCAA tournament and win that thing. And for me, I just do not see Thomas Gilman at 125 being denied this season. I don't necessarily know that translates into running the table. He might drop a match, but I see him as a guy like Nico Megaludis was last year. If he gets to the finals, I don't think Thomas Gilman is going to be a guy that's going to give up that NCAA tournament because it's his final opportunity. And I just think he is going to be really hungry to do it. And, hey, Corey Clarkson in a similar position, 2-time runner-up. I know that he doesn't want to be in that category with some of those 3-time finalists that never won the NCAA tournament. And so if he gets there and is able to push it over the envelope, but you have Nathan Tomasello, who was a NCAA champion 2 years ago at 125, bumping up to that weight class. So you have a lot of factors that are going to play into how that weight class plays out. So that's what makes it fun, though. That's what makes it fun.
A couple of the Penn State guys getting beat last year in the finals. It was just they're back this year. I mean,
they're back, yeah, and they have a lot of those guys back, and so I think that makes it fun. And Penn State keeps getting the recruits. Cale Sanderson has that aura like Gable did back in the era where you want to go to the University of Iowa like it is Penn State now. Name recognition, they're winning. That's a juggernaut that is just going to draw in recruits. And I hear it when kids from out of state come in. You just hear it consistently. I want to go to Penn State. That's the high bar right now. And so that's the challenge that the Iowas and the other teams in the country are going to face continually.
Well, they're going to face it continually, but Penn State can only take in so many. They're not going to be able to get the 2 or 3 of the top guys at every weight.
Well, but they keep taking them in, and they're able to get...
A lot of those kids I don't think will be satisfied waiting their turn.
We'll find out, and we're going to find out more from Dwight Hinson. He's our lone interview today. Dwight Hinson next on the mat, 1650 The Fan.
Your station for the Iowa State Cyclones, 1650 The Fan.
We are back on the mat, 1650 The Fan. I'm Kyle Klingman of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Dan Gable Museum, along with Doug Van Gelder. Doug, our guest today is someone that if we would have had Big Ten Network or some of these mainstream outlets, we had Iowa Public Television, but if you would have had someone with a personality like our guest, he would be either a hero or a villain, but you would leave entertained. 4-time All-American Dwight Hinson reached the finals of the NCAA Wrestling Tournament in 1996, wrestled for Iowa State. He's with us. How are you, Dwight?
How are you? Hello.
Hey, it's great to have you on the show. You're someone that I grew up watching, loved watching you wrestle, and it's going to be fun to learn more about your career.
That is awesome. You're making me feel old now.
Well, hey, think how I feel. Think how I feel. Hey,
all right.
How does a guy from Lawton, Oklahoma, where you're from, ended up in Ames, Iowa at Iowa State University?
Well, here is the situation. Back when I was being recruited, OSU and OU were going through some situations. Of course, OSU was facing like maybe a NCAA penalty violation, and they couldn't offer any scholarships to any of the graduates from the 93 class. And during that time, I was looking in Okie State. I was looking at Oklahoma. Oklahoma had some situations going on that, that wasn't favorable to me. But I was definitely looking at OSU. At the time that John Smith was recruiting me, he couldn't offer any full rides during that time. Since I was a two-time state champ, national champ, I thought I needed a full ride, and, they just couldn't give it to me during that time because of the violation they were on during the time. Bobby Douglas, always been a fan of his. Actually, Coach Holt, my high school coach, was a big fan of his. And he's like, hey, if you're going to go anywhere, I want you to go somewhere that's going to, somewhere you can get your degree. They care about you. Not that Okie State didn't, but, they had situations during that time that, that wasn't good for me. So,
now, did you grow up an Oklahoma State fan or OU fan, or did you kind of like Iowa State on the fringe anyway?
Well, they were on the fringe anyway.
Okay.
Honestly, Oklahoma State's always been in mind. Always been a fan. I grew up just being around OU Sooners and also the Okie State Cowboys. John Smith was a hero in Oklahoma. He's like a superhero in Oklahoma when you first learn how to wrestle. And I started pretty late. I started in the 8th grade. So when you're first learning how to wrestle, that's all people say. John Smith, and then they bring up Gable, which is, pretty much connection to Iowa, and that's what brought me here, too.
So did you know much about the sport before 8th grade? If you started, was it just something that you decided to come out, or someone got you out? That's pretty interesting.
Well, here's the story. I was a military brat.
Okay,
we moved all around the state. We lived everywhere. In the 8th grade, in the middle of the 8th grade, we moved from Virginia, small town in Virginia. My dad was overseas. He came back and decided, we're going to move to Oklahoma because he got his orders to go to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, which is in Martin, Oklahoma. So we get there. It's the middle of the football season, and I'm like, man, can I go play basketball? I didn't know anything about wrestling. Middle of the football season, tried to go out, but the coach was like, nah, we're in the middle of the season right now, try another sport. So history teacher, which later became my lifelong coach, high school coach, Coach Holt, came up to me and said, hey, you kind of fit the body type of a wrestler. And I was like, oh, yeah? How you figure that? Well, you're short, you're stout, and it looks like you got some strength, good hood on your shoulder. I'm like, okay. So he's like kind of filling my muscles up a little bit, and I'm kind of getting weirded out. But he's like, hey, stop by the wrestling room, see if you like it. And I'm like, wrestling? I said, I've never wrestled in my life. I said, I see it on TV. And he's like, son, this is not TV. So I went upstairs to the wrestling room, Central Junior High, Lawton, Oklahoma, and I was amazed. Didn't know your body could bend so many ways. Didn't know that there were so many maneuvers that you can use to manipulate a body. Let's just say that.
Right.
And I fell in love with it.
And were you good right away, or was there a sharp learning curve?
Well, athleticism helped me out a bit. And I'll tell you what, one of the first moves is what I learned on TV, but come to find out it's called what do we call it, a high flyer? I've seen it done on, like, the WWF. Let's just joke about that. I've seen it done on the WWF, and I started doing it with my brother in the living room, and I was like, I didn't even know if it was a wrestling move, and Coach Holt was like, yeah, that's a wrestling move, but it's not the Coco Beware or whatever you want to call it. This is called a high flyer, and this is how you do it. So he actually showed me the technique on it, but definitely being an athlete helped out a lot.
On the line with Dwight Hinson, 4-time All-American from Iowa State. We're talking about your growing up in Oklahoma and how you got interested in the sport. I know that Lee Kemp had said that when he was getting started, he would identify with other good African-American wrestlers. One of the great ones out of there was Kenny Monday. Was that the same for you? Did you see some of the African-American wrestlers and identify with them?
I did. One was definitely Kenny Monday. He wrestled for OSU, but, of course, he was out of that Tulsa-Webster area, and we wrestled a lot of individuals from Tulsa-Webster, and their main guy was Kenny Monday. So we'd always hear about Kenny Monday. We've had posters up in the locker room about Kenny Monday, John Smith, Bobby Douglas, Nate Carr was one of them. It was awesome. But one of the biggest influences for me was probably a man named Mickey Martin. And Mickey Martin wrestled for OU back in around the time Bobby Douglas was wrestling for OSU. And they actually met in the finals. And there's actually some connection to that because Mickey Martin also put me on to Bobby Douglas. Said, hey, he's a good man. He'll get you through school. He'll get you graduated and get your degree. Make a man out of you. He really loves his athletes. So that was my connection to Iowa State as well.
Now, when you got involved in 8th grade, did you find yourself traveling a lot, or was it just a slow progression? Because a lot of these kids, they're wrestling 50, 60, 70 matches by the time they're 6 years old. How many matches did you get early on to get you to the point where, hey, I'm solid and I can be really good at this?
You know what? It was a slow start, but I was lucky to land in the hotbed in a feeder program, which was under my coach, Coach Ellis Holt. Lawton, Oklahoma was also the home of Joe Zuspan, Fort Dodge native.
Sure.
He was also the high school coach for Lawton High School, which became a powerhouse and also national champions back in the 90s when I was wrestling in high school.
Okay.
So I came in with that group. So we were always traveling. We were going to Kansas City, traveling to Missouri, just outside of Oklahoma. Anywhere there was a tournament outside of Oklahoma, we were there. It didn't matter if it was during the spring, summer, or fall, we were doing something, and we were staying busy. So I would say for a year, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th, I mean, we were doing 50, 60 matches, a bunch of traveling tournaments for sure.
Do you remember a moment where you said, all right, I am good now? I mean, it's clicking for me, and you had a quintessential match, and you said, this is where I'm supposed to be.
Right. Well, that happens, and I say it was a little bit of luck, too. Like I said, being an athlete helps out. My 8th grade year, junior high, I got second. 9th grade year, I got second.
Right.
I made a mistake in a match and ended up getting beat. I was up on a guy, and then I'd get flipped on my back, some stupid reason. But anyway, I would say towards that sophomore year, I wrestled a senior by the name of Matt Orr, and Matt Orr was at a powerhouse by the name of Midwest City, Oklahoma. So Midwest City High School, and they were known. I think during the time, Matt Orr was like a national champion, and then I ended up beating him at a duel that we had at Lawton.
Okay.
That's when I knew. I was like, all right, I'm on my way here. I'm beating some top kids, and this is going good.
On the line with Dwight Hinson, 4-time All-American from Iowa State. You get to Iowa State, take a redshirt year. How difficult was that transition getting to Iowa State and really fitting in with that program?
It was great. It was great. I mean, we had all the amenities here, nice facility. During the time that I came, our wrestling room was top-notch, and I think it still is. But during the time, a lot of people were getting those kind of the long-looking wrestling rooms with the new padding in it. It had the best media systems in there as far as camera work, being able to record your matches, practice matches. It had everything I needed, saunas and everything. It was beautiful. So it didn't take that long to adapt at all because I felt at home, and they matched my needs.
Now, we had Eric Aiken on the show last week, and I think you had a year crossover. What was that like having Eric in the program for that year when you were redshirting and he was a senior?
Eric was awesome. He was definitely somebody you can learn off of because he was the out-of-the-box type of wrestler. His technique was awesome. Just a lot of the scrambles he would get into got you thinking. When you come straight out of high school and you're taking down some of these high school kids, college kids coming in the room, you're like, all right, it's not just going to be one takedown. After you take them down, you continue to wrestle. You don't just lay on them. So you learn about flurrying, constant motion, and that's what I got from Eric.
Now, when you come from Oklahoma to Iowa State, of course, Iowa has great pride in its wrestling, as you know now, because you're still heavily involved in the state and doing some great things. But when you come as an outsider, you come from Oklahoma, come to Iowa State, and you have to get in the Iowa matchups. What is that like for you when you first came out in '95? You're a freshman, and you kind of took the nation by storm. You had a great season, placed third at the NCAA tournament, and you wrestled Jeff McGinnis. What's that like coming out of the chute and having that opportunity?
It was awesome. And, that was a big reason why I chose Iowa State, is to be closer to competition. And Jeff McGinnis was definitely a person that pushed me to the limit, made me better wrestler for sure, and just, taught me how to compete. He's great. He's a great champion. I did have some hard times with him, but they were real close. He would always have that edge over me because he was so flexible. He was so flexible, and again, he would scramble. So it wouldn't be a takedown and hold him. He would be moving. And so, he was a great competitor for me. And, that's the reason why I came to Iowa State, was to wrestle one of the best, and he was definitely one of them.
Well, now the rivalry that I think what I'm going to talk about here is against Oklahoma State. Eric Guerrero. Your career record is 6-2 against Eric Guerrero. He ended up being a 3-time NCAA champion. You were a 3-time Big 12 champion. Beat him in the finals every year at the Big 12s. And Doug and I were talking about this, where in any other sport, by any standard, if you have a record like that, and Eric Guerrero got inducted as a distinguished member in the Hall of Fame, and he's a great wrestler, went on to Olympic teams, but if you don't win the big one, you kind of get judged a little bit different in college wrestling. Is that fair?
Yeah.
I mean, you had a great career where you had all these titles. You go 6-2. How do you view that, knowing that you had such a great record against such a great wrestler, but he kind of gets the accolades?
Yeah, it's one of those things when you look at sports as a whole. You got your winners, and then you got those that get it done when they need to. And he definitely did that. So I can't take anything away from Mr. Guerrero. He made me a great wrestler. We had some great memories. But oftentimes when you come in as a bridesmaid, you often think of yourself as the like a Buffalo Bill or something. Not to bring up other sports like that, but I'm a Cowboys fan. But the first thing that comes to mind is, oh man, I'm like the Buffalo Bills. So, but you know what? It was. I loved my college years even after, and that's why I continued what I'm doing right now with the Kids Club.
Now,
you got to have a passion for the sport.
Did you get up for Oklahoma State when you had Guerrero? Was that a guy that you keyed in on? I would say, it's every time we went or wrestled, anytime I wrestled either OU or Okie State, I wanted to do my best against them because, for one, I'm from that state. And it's like, hey, I chose Iowa State, but hey, I'm going to let you know anytime I step on the red dirt of Oklahoma, the red clay, I'm going to win this match. And that was my mentality. Right.
That was definitely my mentality.
And
no holds barred on that.
With a guy like Guerrero, have you guys talked, or do you guys have a friendship or relationship past just wrestling him?
You know what? Yeah, I've seen him a couple times, and we did talk, especially with my younger son. I think we were at a tournament, and it might have been the Big 12 when it was here at Iowa State a couple years back. And I told him, hey, me and this young man right here, I call him a young man, he's younger than me, but we had some bouts when we were in college, and he made me into a better wrestler, And, my son would always ask, well, did you win? I said, yeah, I got most of them. But he won the big one, for sure, so.
Now, the one, and it was a couple times, and I like this, first of all. I like the swagger. You beat Eric Guerrero, and you come off the mat, and you do a little jig, and you're dancing. Is that planned out, or is that organic? Is that just you?
It's just all of a feel, because I think at one point, the reason for the celebration was because I believe he ended up beating me either by 1 point. I think it was at the national duels.
Oh yeah,
it was at the national duels. He ended up beating me. I had a brace on my knee. Not to make an excuse, but I had a brace on my knee and didn't wrestle like I was supposed to because of it. But he ended up beating me, and so I wanted to let him know that, hey, this is the new me. What's the past is the past. I got this win now. So yeah, I enjoyed it.
All right, I gotta ask, what happened in that match against Doug Schwab where you got DQ'd?
Oh, you know what? Here's the thing. When you look back at my career, and, did I overlook him? I might have. You got a young stud coming in, and you're like, about to be a 4-time All-American trying to go for a national title, you're not actually looking at how these young guys are going to come in against you. You know, you think they're going to be bowing down to you and everything like that. So I may have overlooked them a little bit. Another thing I overlooked was my weight. When you look at it, I was always at the same weight, you know. I always tell myself, well, maybe that senior year I should have just bumped up, you know, because I was struggling to make that weight.
Okay.
I was just a big 126, 133 pounder then, and it was hard making the weight, and I misjudged it.
Yeah.
Let's just say that. Not to take anything away from Doug Schwab, but he's a great competitor, and, he earned it.
On the line with Dwight Hinson, 4-time All-American from Iowa State. We got about a minute here, and we want to make sure we get this question in because we ask all of our guests this question. If you had your wrestling Mount Rushmore, what 4 people would be on that?
All right. So far, it would be, of course, Bobby Douglas.
All right.
All right. Dan Gable. I would have, being Oklahoman, of course, John Smith. And the last one would be, I would say, Dave Schultz.
Dave Schultz.
Yes,
Did you get a chance to meet Dave Schultz?
I did. Yes, I did. Going back to watching the movie Foxcatcher brought back some memories. We were able to go out there and train with the 96 freestyle team. I was one of Tom Brands' wrestling partners. And before that, the year before, I got to go out to Foxcatcher.
Oh, cool.
And we trained with the world team, and that's when, Dave Schultz was still around, of course. And I was working with Kendall Cross on like a gut wrench, and he grabbed a hold of me and said, hey, this is how you do it, showed me the right technique on it, and that man just amazed me, man. He's like a Yoda. It was a Yoda to the sport.
Have to take our first break. We'll be back with more Dwight Hinson next on the mat, 1650 The Fan.
1650 The Fan, KCNZ.
We are back on the mat, 1650 The Fan. I am Kyle Klingman of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Dan Gable Museum, along with Doug Van Gelder. On the line with Dwight Hinson, 4-time All-American from Iowa State. And we talked about your college career. I don't know that I remember you trying the freestyle thing after college. Clarify that if I'm wrong, but I don't remember you really giving it a crack.
Yeah, and I did. I actually went to, I competed at, I forget what year it is, but it was Sunkist Open, and I wrestled, I actually won it that year. Couldn't give you the date on it, of course, but I wrestled Sammy Henson after he won his world title.
Okay, 98, 98.
The year after he won his world title,
okay.
I wrestled at the Sunkist Open, and then the semifinals I wrestled Sammy Henson and beat him, and then I went on to win the finals against Danny Felix. So, it was a good start. Of course, after that, I went into the police academy here in Iowa and became a police officer. So that's where the struggle began because I was a night shift officer trying to lose weight, trying to get in the morning and get it all in. And, it just didn't work out as well as I wanted it to because I was, making weight, trying to make weight, trying to find the time to practice and also work as a police officer. So this is where you have to struggle with serving 2 masters, trying to work full-time and then trying to train full-time. So I like how these guys are doing it now to get the funding that they need so they don't have to do that. I mean, they can just concentrate on freestyle wrestling.
Do you wish you would have gone that route? Because we both know you have a great style for it. You're explosive, and freestyle is good because you don't have to worry about top or bottom game as much. It seemed like it would have been a great fit for you given your style. Do you wish you would have pursued it a little bit harder?
Big time. Because, I continued to go to some other tournaments like the Dave Schultz Open. I got third place there, placed there a couple of times. And some other tournaments. I was a University National Champion in freestyle, which qualified me to be a part of the Pan American team. And I wrestled with Bono, my teammate during the time, and we wrestled at, San Juan, Puerto Rico. I believe we got second and third as a team, and I got third, the bronze at my weight. So it was an awesome experience. It's just, I was serving 2 masters, and at the time I was really getting into, my occupation of being a full-time police officer. So, when I look back at it, I'm like, I should have held back a little bit longer. And then, as you get older, you get the injuries. So I guess that kind of made up my mind, too, with all the injuries coming along with it. So,
What drew you into the police academy? Is that something you always wanted to do?
Yes, in my own way. It was either gonna, follow my father's route. He was a military career man. Go that route, or be a law enforcement officer. I always wanted to help people, promote change, and promote some difference out there, I guess.
And I would think having a wrestling background really has to translate well into that profession.
It helps out a lot. It's just wrestling is all about what you can control, and that's what I bring to being a law enforcement officer, is about what you can control. In spite of what's going on these days, I mean, things are getting out of hand, with civilians and law enforcement. So, we definitely got to have and show different tactics in to dealing with people these days.
So I got to think there's a time when you were in the law enforcement training where, of course, there's probably some one-on-one combat, and they found out who Dwight Hinson was, I'm assuming.
Oh, yeah. So, definitely they were kind of picking me out, saying, hey, why don't you lead the class on a couple of things. A couple of instructors who were showing certain maneuvers were like, well, you can probably teach this class. So, you definitely get highlighted. And, so you definitely got to step up and say, hey, this is what I know. This is what I believe can help us out as law enforcement officials.
Did anyone try to test you and say, he's not that tough, we'll try him out?
Never had it. Everybody's just kind of staying away and keeping their ground. So, oftentimes you get a couple challenges, but it wouldn't last long.
Yep. On the line with Dwight Hinson, 4-time All-American, who is currently still in Iowa, which I think is great. You glad you're still in the state representing Iowa?
I do. I love Iowa. I get to go back to Oklahoma for the holidays, see family during the summer times, catch up with some of my buddies out there, like Hardell Moore, Edwin Lauren, a lot of my Lawton family, yes.
Now, you are still involved in the sport on the kids' side, which I think is great because Eric Aiken is in the same boat, and you get to actually instruct kids the way that you needed to be instructed when you were growing up with wrestling. How rewarding is that, and why is that important for you to stay with that kids program?
I look at it, it's nothing you're going to get rich off of, but it's something that it carries its weight more than anything, because it's like, you're giving back to the community, you're giving back to kids. I didn't turn out bad or anything. I'm still being a productive citizen, and that's the type of message I share to my kids. It's like, hey, with the sport, this is what you learn. You learn how to take care of yourself. You learn how to be accountable, be respectful to others, but you still want to have that competitive edge, get out there and do the best that you can and get the most out of yourself, and that's by learning the sport.
And as far as the kids that you get in the program, are they coming from a background where the parents came in and they wrestled, and are you able to get some new kids that never experienced the sport and get to experience what you just talked about with growing through the sport of wrestling?
Oh, man, it's a bag of Skittles. It's a bag of Skittles. Just where we're at, man, it's we get a bunch of kids who are coming from basketball. They're coming from basketball and just learning the sport.
Right.
So I'm just trying to encourage the sport more around here because everybody loves Fred Hoiberg around this part of town. So we're definitely pulling in the kids that want to learn, that do have parents that used to wrestle back in their day, but definitely they're coming from other sports, wanting to learn about it. And, we get a mixed bag of goodies around here.
And so it's the Central Iowa Wrestling Club, and it's out of Ames, Iowa, but you live in Des Moines? Is that how it works?
No, I live in Ames.
You live in Ames, okay.
I live in Ames, yes. And
are you law enforcement in Des Moines or Ames?
I'm law enforcement in Ames. I'm a state, I work for the university, so I'm a Iowa State University police officer, state official. Okay.
And did you had some connection with the program where you either were an assistant coach or you helped out? Is that still a capacity you have with Iowa State?
I do. I actually went into the room just the other day, and as you can say, I serve as their liaison. for the team. Every year, whether it was Bobby, Kale, and even KJ, they invited me in every year to come speak to the team, especially the newer athletes coming in. Just say, hey, this is I like what I did my career here. You know, I'm a law enforcement officer serving for the university, and hey, you know, he's here to, you know, teach you guys how to stay out of that negative limelight. So that's my purpose and what I'm doing right now.
Do you work at all with the high school?
With the high schools, yes. I go up to Ames High School every now and then. I have connections with Gilbert, and I go as far as like Webster City and help those guys out.
Okay, I was just wondering. Andy Feck, the coach at Ames, there is from Grundy or from Cedar Falls here. So I just coached him at one time, and I just wondered if you were.
Oh yeah. Me and we do have contacts. I actually run a little bit of a club on Thursdays out of his room, just to help out some of the greenhorn kids coming into the sport.
Sure. On the line with Dwight Hinson, 4-time All-American
Sounds
for
like fun.
Iowa State, and part of the Central Iowa Wrestling Club out of Ames, Iowa. And as we talk about how you got to this point and where kids are in the journey of wrestling, what's changed technically from when you wrestled till now?
Let me see. These kids are learning how to scramble a little bit more. I've seen a huge evolution in that. Just going from being able to chain wrestle, especially these kids at the AAU level, man, they're chain wrestling like it's nothing. And you know, and they're grabbing more of a concept of how to not just hold, take down, you know, chain wrestle, one move to another, one move to another, just working on building up points. That's what I've seen the most. And
you didn't, I mean, scrambling, when I think about it, you were a control wrestler. I never saw you as a guy that really liked to get into scrambles. You like to control the situation. Isn't that, I mean, if that's accurate, isn't that something that you want to strive for? Is that if you shoot a clean double, you want to just finish it and not get in those scrambles. How do you avoid scrambles?
Solid takedowns for sure. I mean, when I was wrestling, man, it was one of those things, especially after you make weight. And you're dead tired, it's like you take them down, you're going to control them.
Right.
If you get into the scrambles, that's when you start getting tired, especially if you lost a bunch of weight the night before or something. So maybe that had something to do with explaining my style again.
Right. And you were in a great era for 133-pounders, 126-pounders. We went through some of them earlier. You had Eric Jaton, you had Eric Guerrero, Mike Mena. I think there was a Kobe Wright. From Long and Lanky, Jeff McGinnis. So you had a great era. When you look at the 133-pounders today, whether it's Nashawn Garrett or Corey Clark, you kind of think, hey, I think I could beat these guys.
You know what? I could say that. But, you know, there's a couple individuals there that might give me a run for my money. But definitely the class that I came up with were tough individuals, man. Take nothing from them. Very tough.
Who was the toughest of that group for you?
Let's see here. You know what? I'm going to say, I would say McGinnis.
McGinnis was toughest.
Flexible.
Yeah.
And also, second would be probably another Iowa kid. Our wrestler would be Mena. Both of those guys brought the intensity. And just because, you know, where they were wrestling, being Hawkeyes, you expected it.
I always thought of you as the type of wrestler that could force people into making mistakes. And those guys those guys wouldn't give in to that pressure.
Right. And oftentimes, you know, as you can see, some of the matches, they were like a chess game because it was like, all right, who's going to do what? And, you know, with certain individuals, you didn't want to get into a scramble situation. You definitely had to look for the mistakes being made, and if I beat any of those guys, it was off their mistakes.
Did Bobby have a different tone when you went in against University of Iowa and wrestled them?
Yeah, but you know, he was like the Zen master. He was like, you know, just wrestle how we wrestle.
Right.
Wrestle how we wrestle. Don't wrestle how the Hawkeyes wrestle, because for one, I mean, you like to think all wrestlers train the same, but I'll tell you the truth, man. The Hawkeyes, they train hard. I mean, and they worked on their cardio. We were mainly a we were very technical. Let's just say that. We were a very technical team for the Cyclones. So, of course, we don't want to go into a match where, we would like to think we have the best conditioning, but we don't want to test that. We want to go off our technique, play the chess game, have them make mistakes, capitalize, and take it.
All right, we're going to see you at the NCAA wrestling tournament in St. Louis this year?
Yes, I'll be there.
And you go every year, from what I remember. I think I see you there every year. I don't think you miss.
Now, I've slowed down a little bit because I had a couple kids.
Oh, okay.
And then, we've got wrestling going on, too. So, yeah. So I've had to sacrifice a couple of NCAA tournaments. But definitely St. Louis, a little bit closer now. I'll be there.
Well, we need to get you up to Waterloo. I know that we have some good groups.
No doubt.
Future Trojan Wrestling Club is doing some good things. And last time I saw you was at the Willie Gadsden tournament. So I hope you'll be up there again for that.
That's our plan. That's our plan. We're planning to do our little loop again, as we're going to wrestle at Clear Lake, and then we're going to travel night before over to Waterloo, and we're going to do it again. We enjoyed that tournament. The kids loved it, and it was good to see Kyvan. Talk to him always.
Yep.
But it's a great atmosphere. Anytime you go to Waterloo, you're dealing with some history.
All right. If you make it to Waterloo, stop in and see us at the Gable Museum. We've really enjoyed having you on the program. It was always fun. Fun watching you wrestle, and really fun interview. So thanks for being on.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That was Dwight Hinson, 4-time All-American for Iowa State. Great catching up with him and learning about how he got to Iowa State. I would have had no idea that he started wrestling in 8th grade. Kind of a Lee Kemp story where he started in 9th grade and they went on to great things. So fun to hear from Dwight Hinson. Doug, fun show for Dwight Hinson and the great Doug Van Gelder, who I will be voting for whatever office he decides to run for. I'm Kyle Klingman. You've been listening to On the Mat on 1650 The Fan.
You've been listening to On the Mat, the Cedar Valley's longest-running radio show devoted entirely to wrestling. Brought to you by Rolling Ford and the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Dan Gable Museum on 1650 The Fan.
This show is part of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to MattTalkOnline.com.